I'm like, what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? Live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'ma live it, I'ma live it to death. So what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? And live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'ma live it, I'ma live it to death. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Family First Life Living Hope Agency call. I'm excited for our call tonight, and the topic with our special guest, Josh Lockhart, is how to not go broke in insurance. Guys, this is a business where it can be one of the best commission sales gigs on the planet, or it can be one of the worst commission sales gigs on the planet if you don't go ahead and take it seriously. So I'm excited for our special guest. Josh, how we doing, man?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, man. Hey, give me some perspective, because this was your idea to do this call. And this is a call that we figure it could be a little triggering for some agents who are here, who consider themselves full-time. And we're going to talk about a few things, some practices, some things that can keep you in business, and some things that really quickly are going to, take you out of the business if you don't take it seriously. But, kind of what was your thought process leading up to this call and wanting to really address this?
Yeah, I appreciate you letting everybody know that was my idea. So this is a good call, is my idea. If it's a bad call, really, Jamie put me up to it. So I'm just going to throw that out there. No, but I mean, a lot of people come into this that maybe have never been self-employed. They're new to the insurance industry, or maybe they've never made money like a lot of our agents do. And they don't even know how to be a good steward of the resources, the newfound resources that they've been given. And there's traps and mistakes and quite frankly, limiting beliefs that you can really put yourself in a bad spot if you don't know how to navigate them, or there a lot of times you kind of make decisions by default based on all the past things that you've done. And that, of course, got you to your current circumstances, which you might not be happy about. And so now that you're in this new opportunity, if you kind of make those same mistakes moving forward, it's just going to put you in a bad spot. So I just wanted to help people to avoid those. Of course, I've made plenty of those myself. And that's one thing I love about what we do, is you get to instantly surround yourself with people like yourself and others that have already gone out there. They've made mistakes. They've made things happen in a big way financially and in business. And so instead of going, well, hey, I need to go make all the mistakes and learn the lessons for myself, what really smart people do, they go, I'm going to learn the lessons from other people so I don't have to make those same mistakes myself.
I love it, man. So I think it's important, guys, just to note that this is a business where there are some that are doing incredibly well that are not good stewards of their commission. And there are some agents who, I would say, are doing pretty average, but their return on investment, their profitability is better than some people who are not good stewards of their business. So just because somebody goes out and they, are a Hall of Fame producer, and this is a call that we want to be totally honest and transparent with, guys. Just because somebody is a top producer or has a huge agency doesn't mean that they're doing well financially, because there's so much that can go wrong here if you're not a good steward. And I think the reason that Josh and I feel qualified to be able to come on here and talk to you guys is because we've done a really bad job in past businesses. And we've done all the things that you're not supposed to do. I'm a bankruptcy survivor, 2017, got all my stuff taken away from me, repossessed. I've gone down the far end of what not to do in commission-based sales. So I want to make sure that I have the credibility to tell y'all of what not to do. And I definitely want to help you guys avoid that, because trust me, it's not fun to get, your car taken in front of your friends and family and have to, reduce your lifestyle, pretty greatly, until you can go ahead and recover. So we want to help you guys thrive, because it's very simple to be able to do that if you just follow a couple basic principles. Now, obviously, we can talk about some practical things, which we are going to talk about tonight when it comes down to how you should structure your bank account, how you should get prepped for taxes, how you can make sure that you can climb out of these chargeback holes and avoid them and minimize them. We're going to talk about that, because that stuff is really important. But I mean, Josh, I think you'd agree that if you don't have the right mindset in this business around selling and continuing to sell and consistency around selling, that's honestly more cancerous to your business than any type of practicality. If somebody has the right mindset around selling and consistently selling, they can do really well financially just because they don't stop working. But then you have somebody who can have all the best practices in the world, but if they sell 3 policies one week and 21 policies the next week, and then no policies for the next 3 weeks, that person's in more trouble than the person who just continues to work and has that consistency. So Josh, talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in your own personal, journey here in Family First Life, what you've seen with other agents. What are some of the pitfalls and traps that people can fall into from a consistency perspective, and kind of what are the positives and the negatives, like 2 different roads you could go down if you are consistent versus if you're not consistent?
Man, yeah, it can be a little all over the place. I mean, of course, this is an advanced business, right? We get advanced commissions from all the carriers, which is awesome. You can go out and, write policies, which quite frankly, you can make as much in a policy or a day or a week than some people make in a month or even a year. It's quite crazy in a good way. But again, if you're not consistent, that can just lead to some really bad practices. And that's consistency in your work ethic. It's consistency with your finances. So kind of on maybe a negative side, I mean, I've seen agents that come in and do incredibly well in the short term, right? They go out and they have a big day, a big week, a big month. And, when I was watching videos, when I first started with FFL, they would call it going to Disney World, right? Where they get this big commission and you want to go enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? You take a vacation, you go and do that thing that you've been meaning to do with the family, or that promise. And you say, hey, we can finally take that trip. And then you take that money and you go spend it outside of your business. And then you have some time off. And of course, if you've been doing enough business, even if you have one chargeback, right? It could be one tiny chargeback. That can set you off. And we've seen agents that go out, they do that, they spend all their money, which is literally the equivalent of taking their business out in the backyard and shooting it in the head, because now you have no resources for leads. You can't get, restarted again. And then they come back a couple weeks or a couple months later to the starting line and they go, I don't have any money for leads to get this thing rolling again. So now what do? I mean, it's a terrible spot to be in. Or like you said, it's the person who has a big week this week, so they slow down next week and, they increase their lifestyle, right? They go buy the new whatever it is, right? The new car, right? They get a, better place to stay. They go out and get some more reoccurring bills. And now, instead of, letting that momentum kind of build and build and build, all of a sudden now it's like maybe you can pay all your bills on $3 or $4 grand a month. Well, now there's 6 or 7 or 8, and you have to maintain that level of production just to maintain your lifestyle. And that can wear on people. It, stresses you out. And then next time you're in front of a customer, instead of focused on, let me help this family and what do I need to do and what do I need to say, it's like, hey, I got to pay my note, right? So let me go ahead and push this one through however I have to. So, I mean, I've seen that happen a few times where, because like you said, I'd gone down that road in previous life. When we got started, I said, well, we're not going to change our lifestyle, at least until we've been here a year. I mean, being here a year, you're kind of figuring things out and all the little nuanced things about the business to where, quite frankly, we're at a spot where what I pay for my housing is like the least of my worries. I don't even notice it because, we've grown our income to the point and we have expenses, business expenses and leads and marketing and all these things where it just makes it nice where you can make nice, clear, concise business decisions without worrying about, hey, am I covering my proverbial nut, as they say, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's a good transition here because a couple notes that we wrote down. We wrote down paying the business first. I want you to expand upon that. And then we talked about, you already kind of touched on it, increasing your lifestyle and your liabilities a little bit too quickly. So the person who, already, let's say, comes in and they, hey, how much do you need to make to survive? Well, I need to make at least $3,000. Okay. Well, what do you need to make to survive plus leads? Okay. Because leads are what's going to keep you in business. And we'll talk a little bit more about leads, the concept of, not working your leads enough, people who overbuy leads. It's like this paradox, and like the pendulum swings from left to right. And you guys are going to see that a lot, of somebody who they save way too much money into their own personal account, but they don't save anything into their business, or they invest way too much money into their personal business and they overinvest, and it's not in a smart way, versus underinvest. So let's talk about paying the business first, Josh. So just from a producer perspective, because that's most people on here, there's of course going to be, the 5-10% that are building an agency. And we want to speak to them as well a little bit more towards the end of the call at some different things as your business starts to expand. But from a production, producer, individual insurance salesperson, what does paying the business first mean?
So, I guess two things. A is, you go out there and you make a sale and you make a commission, right? And usually the commission is going to be a multiple times more than the money you spent on leads, right? So you go out there, you make a sale, and then what most people want to do if they've never done commission sales before is you're like, hey, great, I have this money. Let me go spend it on bills or pay off debt or whatever. But that's not your money. That's your business's money, right? Of course, out of that is going to come taxes. And you're going to have to reinvest that money if you want to continue that business on, right? And so if you don't do that, again, that's all gone. You can't do that. So when that commission comes in, right, you should have a separate account that has nothing to do with anything you spend personally that money goes into. And so I had a gentleman that we were working with that had he had a full-time job that paid all of his bills, and then he made some additional money with insurance over here on the side. And then I came to him, I said, hey, I noticed you haven't really been buying leads. How come? And he said, well, I have bills and I have to pay my bills. And I said, but your full-time job pays your bills. Your business is extra, and you want to go ahead and, first feed the business. That's the thing that is going to pay you ongoing, right? So if you don't feed that first, you're out of business tomorrow. And so he'd never done anything like this. So it really took him a while to figure out, okay, well, I'm just literally taking the extra money, and I'm maybe he was paying off debt, or maybe he was trying to get ahead on his bills. And I get that. But when you take money out of the business too quick, well, now you can't advance it, right? How are you going to get a lead tomorrow? How are you going to get a new customer? You're not. So you have to first reinvest your money, and then you have to separate those things, right? And so when me and Michelle, we go out and we do something a lot, it's always funny. She's like, can I write this off? Right? Because if it's a business expense, it comes from the business account. If it's a personal expense, it comes from the personal account, and the two never mix, right? When you mix them, that's when you get a little sloppy, right? That's when you go, oh, I have a little extra money, and you go out and do the extra thing, and you just spent your lead money for the week, and now you're not going to make any sales next week.
Yeah, no, I've been there so many times, and I definitely have seen agents get stuck there. I mean, if you guys look at it and you just decide that you're going to treat it like a business, like, you have to separate things. Now, in all my previous businesses, I never separated anything. I commingled everything. I had one account. I don't even think that I had a savings account, because that just wasn't a concept that made sense to me. I was just, okay, checking account, everything that goes in, it comes out of the same place. Now, when you get married, for me, I was like, okay, now I'm going to be combining finances with my spouse. But then it's like my business is like a whole nother marriage. So it's like, now it's like I'm combining finances with my business and my marriage. So I need to separate those things a little bit. Whether you're married or not, making sure that you're not commingling your funds is one of the easiest ways, because we ask people like, hey, how much did you make versus how much do you spend? Well, I don't really know. Well, how much did you spend personally, and how much did you spend in the business? Because some people will be like, hey, dude, I'm broke because the business is costing me too much. I'm like, okay, well, how much are your business expenses? And they break it down. And then I find out it's actually the $900 a month BMW payment that they have. That's actually what's stealing from the business. It's the personal expense. It's the DoorDash and whatever else, which you actually write that off, which you should, but it's whatever those extra things are that you don't need that are typically stealing from the business. It's not necessarily your leads. And if it is, I look at the business being the majority of your expenses. I'm looking at how much you're working, which we'll talk about that here shortly. But just from like a very basic perspective, what everybody, should be doing. And obviously I'm not, an accountant. Don't take financial advice from me. This is just a suggestion. You should get an accountant. Okay. And they're really not that expensive. I have a bookkeeper who does my taxes. I think it's like $300 a month for the bookkeeping, and I go to $600 a month, and she does my taxes as well. And she keeps track of everything. She's She's phenomenal. Okay. So 4 different accounts: personal checking, personal savings, business checking, business savings. Now, when I say business checking, a lot of people, they're like, oh, so I need to go open an LLC and develop an S corp. Eventually, maybe you should. Your first year in the business, you don't need to worry about any of that. That's just my personal experience. In the first year, people are, well, I'll save money on taxes. You're focused on the wrong thing, because you're going to spend money on leads and you're investing into your business and you're learning that at the end of the year, you're going to have so much to write off anyways, that it really doesn't matter what tax bracket you were in based on if you were a sole proprietor who pays more in taxes or an S corp, LLC, whatever. A lot of this stuff is going over a lot of people's heads. You need to learn how to sell insurance. You need to decide if you're going to even survive in this business. So 4 different accounts. I opened up 2 extra personal accounts and I just labeled them business, but they were separate. Okay. That's what matters. The first thing that I did was my wife and I had a conversation and we put $1,500 into the business checking account from our personal savings. That's where my first lead purchase came out of. And guess what? All of my direct deposits, they go into that personal checking account. A very, very simple model that I follow, which you don't have to follow this model, but you should figure out a model that works for you, is every time that you make a deposit, taking a percentage and putting it into your business savings. Okay. And you pay the business first. So I save for the business first. Why do I have a business savings account? I have a business savings account for days when I do have a chargeback, for days when I don't have a lot of deposits, for days when I need to buy leads, but I didn't have many deposits come in. So what do? I take 30% of every single dollar that comes into my account and I put it into the business savings. So if I have a $7 deposit or a $7,000 or a $700 deposit, it doesn't matter. If I have 10 deposits, I add them up in my calculator and I multiply it by 30% and I shovel that money over the business savings account. And I do not use the business savings to pay personal bills. Okay. The business savings are for days when I need to buy leads and I can't with my checking account. Okay. So I do that. And here's the thing, 30%. Why do we do 30%? Typically, it's a good practice to save 30% for taxes when you're self-employed. If you do a good job and you write things off, you write off your leads, your marketing expenses, your office expenses, et cetera, you will not pay 30% in taxes. If you're paying 30% in taxes, fire your accountant, or you need to get an accountant. Okay. One of those 2. So 30%. Here's what I did. My first year, I just put 30%, 30%, 30%, 30%. And at the end of the year, I owed nowhere near 30%. So I had excess money left over. Throughout the year, anytime I had a chargeback week, anytime I had low deposits, I borrowed from myself. I became my own bank. So what I did was I was playing with house money. So I took that original $1,500 and I didn't starve my business so quickly by just immediately going and paying off debt, immediately going and increasing our lifestyle. I waited until we got to a point where I had, quite a few months worth of savings before, we even went from a 1-car household to a 2-car household. And when we went from a 1-car to a 2-car, I didn't go get the $900 a month BMW. I got the $300 a month Toyota. Okay. Because I understand I was trying not to starve my business. So at the end of the year, I ended up having more than what I owed. And guess what? That got to stay in the business savings and compound for the next 2.5 years, where now that business savings has continued to grow. And anytime that there's been an opportunity to invest into my business, whether it was a new marketing campaign or, hey, Jamie, there was a new lead, a new lead vendor that you should try out, but it's $1,000 minimum to start. I was able to try those things. I wasn't afraid to invest into my business because I was willing to pay my business first so that I never had to take money out of my personal account again. When I talk to people about, they're like, well, hey, why aren't you taking your money and putting it into to Bitcoin or NFTs or all these different things? Hey, if you would have gotten into that in 2017, blah, 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 here's what it would be worth. Here's the way I look at it. I've taken $1,500, I put it into a business, and I couldn't even tell you the multiple that my family has been able to get on that $1,500 and never put anything back in. Okay. I've sat with close to 2,000 families. I hit Hall of Fame twice. So you can imagine, there's been some excess, profit that has come from that. So you can look at that and say, okay, well, why didn't you put it there? Well, where are you going to get 100, 200, 300, 400x return? You're not going to get that in, cryptocurrency. You can get it in insurance if you're a good steward of your business. So we're not going to dig too deep into the bank accounts. All that I did was I said, I'm just going to pay myself just enough to pay my bills. And I'm going to write off everything that I can write off. So if I can write off food, I'll write off food. If I can write off gas, I'll write off gas. If I can write off plane tickets and leads and marketing and business cards and whatever else that I need for the business to fund it, software, phone burner, everything that is business related, I'll write that off through the business. And then I'm going to pay myself just enough to pay my rent, to pay for my car, to pay for personal expenses. And I'm going to leave everything else in the business because I'm trying to build something. I'm trying to create cash flow. Okay. So Josh, any final thoughts on, not commingling your funds?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the most organized. And so, two things that you said, when I was in debt, you go, oh, hey, this credit card over here, I'm paying 15% interest. So you quick do the math and you go, man, if I can get rid of that, I'll save so much money. And I got this monkey on my back. But like you said, instead of just shoving everything at that, you say, well, I'm gonna pay the minimum, which they always say don't pay the minimum, and I'm gonna throw all the extra stuff at the business so I can create an additional income. Like Jamie said, and you keep saving, and in the year, imagine you did that 30%, and then you're like, oh wow, now we can go and get the extra car, we can go nuke the credit card debt like in one lump sum. That's actually how it worked out for me. And now our income is, way, way higher than what it was when I had those issues. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is, getting a bookkeeper, having some system where you keep track. And if you separate everything, it's really easy to do because from a practical sense, I mean, if we just said, hey, everybody go track all your expenses, get an additional bank account, save 30%. If we're all robots, then it's done. You don't have to worry about it. But what happens if you don't do that when it comes Sunday night or Wednesday night or whenever, and you're going to tap your card for $500, $600, $800 in leads, and it's coming out of the same account that you're getting ready to pay rent on the first, you're like, oh man, I don't want to do that. And so what happens? You either skimp on your leads or you don't buy them. The first comes, you spent that money, now you're broke. Right. So great advice, Jamie.
Yeah. And just to provide some credibility of why I feel like you guys can listen to us here. I came into this business with close to $60,000 in back tax debt to the IRS because when I was 20, I made a bunch of money. I didn't know I was supposed to save for taxes. So if you're hearing right now and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to save for taxes, and it's like that light bulb like it was for me a couple of years ago, save for taxes. Trust me, you do not want to mess with the IRS. So I had every notice you can imagine in the mail, and it gets pretty scary. So you can imagine when I came into this business, I had a payment plan with the IRS and it was like $400 a month. Okay. How long is it going to take me to pay off 60 grand with interest at $400 a month? A long time. So for me, I was very, very, I wanted to get that off my back. That was my biggest limiting belief for years and years and years that was holding me back. And I made $10,000. I just want to go throw it all at that. I want to chip away at it. But like Josh said, I waited till the end of the year. I oversaved. I saw what was left after I paid my taxes, and there was an excess there. And I was able to start throwing stuff at that in larger lump sums. And then you do that. It's just the compound effect. Like the compound effect, you do something over and over and over and over again, and it just continues to compound and get greater and greater and greater. You keep doing that practice. Imagine if every single deposit, some of y'all that have been here for 2 years, if you would have done that practice from day one, like your business might look totally different. So for me, we were able to pay off those things doing that practice. And I was never had to skimp on my business. I always paid my business first. Then after I paid my business, after I paid my personal bills, and I made sure there was some money in that business savings for just in case I needed to invest into something to grow it faster. Because that's the goal, is to grow this business faster. And if you can't put gasoline on the fire, it's not going to grow faster. But once I did all those things and I saw there was an excess, then I paid off those bills. And guess what? Then it brought down my monthly expenses and it took those, monkeys off my back. And I was able to, feel a lot lighter in this business, moving forward. So paying off all your debt day one, it seems like the right thing to do, but really like let it rock for a little bit longer until like you learn this business and you're going to be here a year from now. You're actually going to be surviving, thriving, consistently cash flowing, and it's predictable. Okay. So another thing that I think is important, just like this mindset, Josh, we talked about of, saving money versus investing money. It's this pendulum that we talked about where it's like the people who they're just penny pinchers and they want to save everything into their personal account and not touch it, like a squirrel hiding nuts for the winter. And then you have the other person who is now saving money for their business in the mindset we just talked about. And then we've got investing into your business, properly investing into your business in a way that actually makes financial sense versus over investing into your business and just throwing, good money after bad, trying to make something work when you're not doing the right practices, and that could be overspending in leads. There's so many different things. So what do you think about just that mindset of, spending versus investing in this business?
So
Saving versus investing.
Yeah, exactly. I've been on both sides of that in my career. And again, it's you want to we all kind of fear, the bad things that can happen in life. And especially if like Jamie, like myself, if you've been through a period of time where you're just broke all the time and all the ugly feelings that come with that. Lord knows I know those feelings well, and I never want to go back. So you get some money and you want to just hold it and hoard it so when you can sleep better at night. But at the end of the day, right, what is wealth creation and generation? It's putting your money to work so it's making money, i.e. in the insurance business, right? You buy leads and marketing and put it into places where with a little bit of your effort that you can multiply that's putting money into assets versus it sitting in your bank account is not doing anything. It's literally with inflation, it's going down, right? And so I had times in years past before FFL where I'd get that money and I was just so scared that I went and paid off all my debt. And what happened was 6 months to a year later, I was back in debt because my income didn't grow, right? It felt good. I felt accomplished and I went around and I'm debt free. And then I was right back where I started 6 months to a year later. And then you have to, that's not a good feeling, right? Especially when you have to look at your spouse in the eye, right? Now, on the other side of that, at this point in time, especially when I got into FFL, Jamie can tell you, I kind of erred on the side of like, hey, let's spend it all now. Which, that's maybe another call for another day, but yeah, we spent heavily, but at that same token, right, we were out and producing at a high level. So we were able to, weather potential storms, but there's the people that, they go day one, they go, well, hey, I'm just going to, buy a bunch of leads today. And then you call them one time. And then you go buy another batch of leads 2 days from now and you call those one time. And you can see where that can really drain the bank account really quick. And you haven't really resolved the leads. And maybe without saying, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to spend your way to the top without doing the proper work. Right. And so you have to find that happy, middle ground. And I'll be honest, for those that have a hard time spending money, I found it a little harder to encourage people to spend more because they're so fearful versus having the guy or gal that's spending too much and kind of reeling that in a little bit. So that is like a muscle and a skill that, spending properly on, an investment, which is leads and marketing.
I mean, if you talk about just like buying enough leads, for instance, I think it's a confidence thing. Like I'm not buying enough leads because I don't have the confidence. Like I'm going to spend $300 versus $1,000 because I don't have the confidence in myself yet to go out and make a return on my investment. So I'm going to spend less, which spending less is actually riskier than spending more. Obviously not spending so much that it's irresponsible, which is the other side of it. But spending $1,000 on leads is less risky than $300 in leads because you get more opportunities to talk to people. Now, there's no reason on God's green earth that you should be spending $4,000 on instant internet leads in 1 week. There's no reason. I don't care what you make. I don't care what you have. You can't call that many leads or resolve that many leads in a timely fashion to where that ever would make sense. So it's like, how many leads can you actually talk to in a day? Well, I've heard, magic number, between 80 to 120 leads a day is typically the number where it's like, okay, I could actually confidently call those 3 times in a row, 3 different times throughout the day and get to between 900 to 1,000 dials. And that's a long dial day. Okay. That means I went from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or later with 100 to 120 names. Now you could do that as well. I could have 1,000 leads and hit them all once. But the likelihood, if you've ever triple dialed before, quadruple dialed someone 7 times and they answer the phone, you're like, oh man, if I wouldn't have hit that person 3 times in a row, they never would have answered if I would have moved on. That's the problem, is that, I think Josh said it, they're trying to spend their way to making money without doing the work. And I think that that's where a lot of the root of the issue actually comes from, is people, they don't want to do the work. So they're looking for alley-oops. They're looking for easy ones. There was somebody, training here in the office today, and they talked about, I'm looking for the ones who say yes. And where I agree with that, we are looking for the ones who say yes. There's the maybes and the no's that can be converted into yeses, where you can squeeze a lot of premium out of these leads if you were willing to just fight, if you're willing to actually work, if you're willing to dial those leads 3 times in a row in one day, versus just being the person who just kind of barely goes through your leads. You don't squeeze your leads. So, I mean, Josh, it's 2 sides to that. So the person who gets too many leads and they don't squeeze anything out of them, they don't resolve anything. And then you got the person who is so frugal, such a penny pincher, that they've bought 13 leads and they've called that same 13 leads over and over again for the last 3 weeks. Like, what would your advice be on either end of the spectrum there?
Well, I actually talked to that person today. This fictitious person, it was a brand new agent, and they probably didn't know any better, but they called me and they said, "Hey, I bought 14 leads today." And I said, "Hey, that's great. If I can, let me just give you some advice here. Don't ever buy only 14 leads, because it doesn't really matter what lead type it is. I've had some, really expensive brand new mailers where I've gotten 10, 11, 12 in a day, and like, they didn't answer. You know what I mean? Like, it could just happen. Or an age lead, you buy 14 and they don't answer. And then what happens is, logically you're like, okay, well, I'll get another 14 and another 14, another 14. But then you go, well, that didn't work. It must be this, it must be that. And then you don't get any more. Right. And so what I told this new agent is, I gave him some advice, on the different types of leads. We have a 1-month-old internet lead discount going on today through WorkSpots, which if you haven't seen that, I would go check that out like right now today. But I said, you should spend about as much, if you have the money, you should spend about as much as one sale, right? So if you just go make out, one sale, like Jamie said, you buy 120 leads, could you make one sale from that? Most people go, yeah, I'm pretty confident I can make one sale. Great. So if you make one, you make your money back. If you make 2, now you're in profit. And what happens is you're moving through the dial day and you're having calls that go well and you're having calls that go bad. You're getting hung up on. Things aren't going your way. Well, if you go through 10 or 20 calls and you have 120, you're like, hey, I have a ton left. I'm not even worried about it. If you have 30 calls and you call 9 of them and they don't answer, you're starting to sweat it. You're going to say some crazy stuff. You're going to be impatient. And obviously that's not going to translate into success on the phones. So 80 to 120 is good, about as much on one sale. Of course, you got to do what you got to do, but yeah, I think that's just a good solid rule of thumb.
Then if somebody called you and they said, hey, I spent $3,000 on instant internet leads today, or I don't know, I've spent $3,000 on instant internet leads today and I haven't made any sales. I haven't booked any appointments. What do you imagine is going on when they have that many leads, 300, 400 leads, 500 leads, and they're telling you that they're not getting a hold of anybody, they're not making any sales? What do you imagine is happening there?
Man, whether it be that, I had another agent one time spent $3,000 on state licenses because this is when telesales was first getting going. And it's like, I just imagine those people are getting ready to get ready, right? They're sitting there, instead of just getting some leads, getting on the phone, burning up the dials, getting the shots, getting your teeth kicked in and kind of figuring it out. Of course, practice your script. Of course, be on live dials, right? Do all those things, but you have to get going. So I just imagine, yeah, those people, they're just like, okay, I have a stockpile of cash. Here I'm going to go and this is going to be really easy. Or they're just thinking crazy stuff, right? I'm going to text them all. I'll send out a text blast and just like all kinds of wild stuff where, again, you're just looking to, overcorrect your lack of work with overspending on leads. And I think you said this, Jamie, you don't need to spend $4,000 on internet leads, no matter who you are. I did that one time. Actually, I spent almost $5,000 in 1 week at like the peak. I was running in the field 6 days a week. And I'm here to tell you, you're absolutely right. Definitely don't spend $5,000 in a week on internet leads. It's one of my mistakes for sure.
Okay, so let's transition to a word that people don't like to talk about. A lot of managers like to pretend like it doesn't exist. They don't want to tell agents about it. The word chargeback. Okay, so a lot of people are afraid of chargebacks. Are you as afraid of chargebacks now as maybe you were as a brand new agent? And kind of how can you dispel, any fear that might be around a chargeback, Josh?
Yeah, I am 0% concerned about chargebacks right now. I don't care about them. I don't worry about them. Now, that doesn't mean I don't pay attention to them, right? I pay attention to all aspects of my business. I track it. I do the best job I can to mitigate those things, right? Actually had a talk with my wife Michelle this week about, chargebacks and things and what we could do better. And I said, and this is coming from Grady, I said we need to spend, maybe 5% of our time on dealing with chargebacks and things like that, and 95% of our time on injecting positive energy into our business, whether it's with agents or clients or whatever. Because if you get too bogged down with it, it's like the sky's falling, I got these chargebacks, oh my gosh. And instead of spending your day dialing and getting new customers or trying to move forward in business, you're just worried about like plugging holes in the boat, and you're never going to plug them all, right? And so at this point, once you've been in the business after 9 months, right, you have the back end money where you're getting that months 10, 11, 12. And if you're building a team, of course, that's going to help in overrides. And so a lot of that's just going to be mitigated by really one thing, right? One thing, and that's the word consistency. I don't know. I haven't met the person. I haven't seen the person who has a major chargeback problem that writes business every week. Whether they write business part-time, like meaning, maybe they're not a top producer, but they're like putting people in, customers in every week, or if they are full-time and they're working every week. The only time I see it as a problem with anybody is when they're inconsistent, right? Like we talked about earlier, you work this week, you don't work next week, or you go out and you have a big week and you don't work the rest of the month. And so, yeah, in the beginning, that's the biggest thing. If you can manage that, right? If you can manage yourself and learn how to employ yourself and stay on track, it's all going to take care of itself. With that said, I have had some pretty big chargebacks. I think my biggest week for chargebacks, it was kind of a crazy situation, was $20,000. So, was I freaked out about that? A little bit. But at the same token, I was doing consistent business every week. It took me a little bit to get through that. Now, part of that reason, Jamie, which I think we're going to talk to, is, kind of spreading out all the different carriers that we have and placing business with a lot of carriers at once. So I was kind of chasing around carriers to kind of get them all taken care of. So that was really where the problem started. But yeah, now the other thing, and again, it goes back to consistency, where people have chargeback problem, and it's not, right? So if you are listening to this and you're like, well, I have a chargeback problem and I work every week. Okay, you think you have a chargeback problem. You feel like you have a chargeback problem. And if I talk to you, you're going to start the sentence off by saying, Josh, I feel like this is not going well. Keyword feel, okay? Right? Numbers and facts don't care about your feelings, right? So I was talking with an agent. Hey, I feel like this is a big problem. So we went to his reports, and he's earned a substantial amount of money this year. Okay. So he's earned way more than any potential chargeback. He's got a chargeback for the equivalent of about 2 sales, like 2. He's done 100 sales and he has a chargeback for 2. We went to his back office portals and he's got good retention. Right. So meaning most of the people are keeping the policy. Right. So I was told that about 20 to 30%, somewhere in there, in your first year is going to fall off. That's industry standard. He's well above that. And so if you have good persistency, if you've made way more and your chargebacks are only 1 or 2 sales, you don't have a chargeback problem. Either you have a consistency work problem, or, right, maybe that 1 or 2 chargebacks that you have is more than you're used to making on your job pre-FFL. And I get it, those look like big numbers, but they're just not here, right? Like if I have 2-3 grand in chargebacks, I'm not worried about it. I can go sell that tomorrow. You know what I mean? If I'm working. Now, if you're not working, again, it's confidence problem, and you got to figure that one out. Would you add anything to that, Jamie?
Yeah. So, okay. So you've had a pretty big chargeback hole before. I definitely have myself. I think my biggest one is probably somewhere, not including agents rolling you chargebacks, but my biggest personal chargeback is probably somewhere around 20 as well. Now, when that happens, you kind of have one of those, like those moments where you look yourself in the mirror and you're like, I'm either going to climb up this mountain and find my way out of this chargeback hole, or I'm done. I'm dead in this business. And that's kind of where you find out what you're made of. So for me, I don't really take anybody super seriously in their first 3 months in this business, because you haven't really experienced what it's like to have business fall off the books. And if you're going to make it past that season, if you're going to make it to the back end money, when somebody makes it to months 10, 11, and 12, and they're still consistent, I go, okay, I know I got somebody who's probably going to be here, hopefully for forever, for a long time, because they've made it this long. Most people quit before that because they can't handle it. They hit one chargeback hole and they're dead in the water. So I look at somebody and I say, you kind of have two options here, because they go, listen, man, I've got $2,000 worth of chargebacks here, 2 here, 5 here, 3 here. And we'll talk about what we call carrier roulette here in a second. But here's the thing. Let's say you've been here in this business for 3 months. You've bought leads consistently every single week, 100 leads every single, twice a week. So you got 200 leads a week for 3 months. What does that math come out to? That's 800 leads a month. That's 2,400 leads. Okay, so I guarantee you didn't get 2,400 sales. You'd be number one on the board. So you got a bunch of unresolved leads. The problem is most people, they look at that and they say, that hill's too tall. That's too much work. That looks like it's going to be a really, really long dial day resolving those leads. Well, I already went through those leads and I already pulled out my appointments and my sales. Guys, I promise you there's some juice left in those leads. And here's the deal with 2,400 leads. If you can't pull a sale or 2 or 3 or 20, or you could probably add 2,400 leads. You could pull Hall of Fame out of 2,400 leads if you worked them hard enough. If you actually went through and resolved every single lead, you could turn that into something. So it's like when I am staring that chargeback in the face, it's kind of like I find out who I really am. I find out if I'm the person who crumbles when things get hard, or if I'm the person who can do hard things. So for me, when I had my first big chargeback, I remember kind of freaking out about it. I called Grady. He's like, dude, man up. And I was like, whoa, okay. All right. I guess it's time to man up. And for me, getting through that, I realized that I could do hard things and that I could be strong in this business. And I was like, okay, I didn't miraculously forget how to sell insurance. Just because some people canceled, I didn't miraculously forget. So I was going to do my job and I'll get through this. I'm going to focus. And guess what? I'm going to have some long dial days. I'm going to have to resolve some extra leads. And then here's the thing is every single time that happened to me, I said, I'm getting out of this hole and I'm never going back. And guess what? You're still going to have little things that happen. But for me, like I look at it as like anybody who's in a bad financial situation, or you're in a hole here with FFL, whether it's their chargebacks or you just like don't have a good ROI, you're not putting money off to the side, you're not saving for taxes, you're in a hole. Like my goal would be, if I already know how to sell insurance, I'm getting out of this hole, I'm getting ahead, and I'm never going back. That has to be the mindset that you have. Well, guess what? When I get to square, best believe 30% of everything that I make is going into that account. I'm going to do that every single time from now on. So I guess, Josh, if I'm a new agent or even a veteran agent and I call you and I say, Josh, I don't know if I can get out of this hole. Like, what's that conversation look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple of things that you said, right? I would say for anybody, until you've been here 6 months, I feel like 6 months is the mark where the honeymoon phase kind of wears off. And you're like, the grind starts to set in, you start to see some chargebacks, and you're like, okay, am I really going to take this seriously, or am I going to dip, So I definitely agree with that. But yeah, I mean, when that happens, like it's just a part of it. It's the risk reward. And so kind of like what Grady said, like, hey, are you going to, overcome this, or is this going to take you out? And if you're going to overcome it, then okay, it's like, what can you do about it? Okay. Are you willing to, do the necessary work and, be on the phones, let's say twice a week or whatever, whatever it is to, get the necessary dials in. I mean, we have a new agent that, with Phone Burner has been doing 1,000 dials a day, almost every day. It's like, it's crazy, but he's willing to go through it. So he's making progress rapidly, right? Where somebody else, maybe they're just not willing to do that. Okay, fine. The other thing is like, you got to look at the real picture. Okay. It's like you have your expenses, you know, if you're in a hole right now, let's drop your expense. I mean, this is what I went through, right? I had that 20,000 in chargebacks and go, what am I spending money on that I don't need to spend money on? Right. I had a dialer, got rid of the dialer, right? I had a bunch of excess lead spend, got rid of that. Had, you know, was putting business in, you know, doing the carrier roulette thing, and for a variety of reasons, right? It's like, okay, let me focus on these 3 carriers, right? Did that. And then, okay, I've been buying leads at that point for, oh gosh, it was what, 8-9 months. So I went back and started selling leads that I'd had for 8 or 9 months. Now you'd say, wow, that's, you know, they're too old and you can't do that. Well, I did that. I absolutely did that. I've gone back several times and I've made sales on leads that were a year old. Now, if you're in a situation, right, you have to do what you have to do. And are you prepared to do that? So, you know, call, text, it's a no excuses mindset. I mean, have you done absolutely everything that you can do? So drop your expenses, you know, the ones that you can afford to, you know, increase the work, increase the frequency on the things that you control. If you already have leads, keep going through those, go through them again, right? Maybe even hit somebody else up and say, hey, do you have any old leads? Let me work them for you. I mean, there's no limit on the things and the resources that you have to be able to get out of that. And then once you're out, of course, you know, like Jamie said, you know, you're back to zero. When you're back to zero, a lot of times you're like, okay, I'm out of it, I'm good. No, you're back to broke, right? Let's just call it what it is. If you're zero, you're broke. It's nothing else, right? And so you have to keep going with that same intensity so you can start to get ahead. And when you get ahead, that's when you can say, okay, well, now I can take advantage of maybe some additional opportunities that present us all the time, right? And so don't work to be broke, work to get ahead.
That's right. And you said drop your expenses. The other thing, you got to drop your ego. Like you're not like, that's the thing, is like the other thing, like I have found agents who they don't want to be in the trenches more than they have to be. Okay. They want to avoid the trench work and they go, that's too dirty of a job. Like, listen, you put yourself in that position. So if you're going to be here and you're going to be selling insurance, whether it's with us or anywhere else, you put yourself in that position, get yourself the heck out of it, or you're not going to be selling insurance anymore. That's it, period. And find out what you're made of. So you got to drop your ego and you got to be willing to work in the trenches. So, this was something that hopefully this doesn't trigger anybody too hard, but, if you're stuck in a hole and you're calling and you're saying, Jamie, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent this month, when you've already made sales and you've proven you can sell insurance and you say, I don't know how I'm going to do it. You don't deserve to have any fun if your family's about to be out on the street. And like, I'm sorry if that comes off a little bit too harsh, but if your family's about to be out on the street, you don't deserve to have any fun. Like Josh and I, like we're like, we joke about this. Like you talk about FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like Josh and I, like, I feel like we're old souls here. I'm over the whole fear of missing out on the, oh, I missed the party, or I missed the Clemson football game, or I missed whatever it is. The only thing that I care about missing right now in my life is watching my kids grow up and making sure I spend enough time with my family. That's it. I love spending time with agents. I love spending time with friends from church. I love small group. I love all of those things. There's things that are necessary for my life that I'm not willing to cut. My wife and I have a weekly marriage meeting. I'm not willing to cut that. Sundays, I'm not willing to cut that. That's my family time, non-negotiable. But guess what? Anything else, dinner party with friends, gone if I'm not paying my rent. You don't deserve to have any fun if you're not paying your bills. Now, it's a lot easier for somebody who's single, who you can just kind of wallow in self-pity. You know, it's a lot easier for that. But like when you have like your wife and your kids looking at you, like, are we going to be able to stay in the house this month, Daddy? Like, I don't care about what I'm missing out on other than time with them. I'll stare whatever hill or mountain chargeback in the face, and I'll kick it. I'll kick it in the stomach, and I'll go and I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll run through a brick wall, but you have to know like what you're fighting for. That's what it comes down to. So do you have what it takes to climb out of the hole or not? If you get yourself in the hole, get yourself out of the hole. That's it, period. Okay. So last couple things, let's talk about carrier roulette before we get too late here, just because I want to make sure this is important. So Josh, what is carrier roulette? How do agents play it, and how do they lose when they play it every time?
So two things. So, the first way you kind of get locked into the carrier roulette is, and I get it, it starts with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, where you want to do the right thing by the client. And so today you write Aetna, the next one you write America, the next one you write Transamerica, the next one you write Great Western, right? Like you're just writing every single, product there is, because you want to make sure that, the client is taken care of the best they are. And of course we want to, but when you spread yourself so thin, that's when things become brittle, and, you can have a break somewhere. And that's what happened to me, right? When I had that big chargeback, is I had my business spread out so thin. So when I did have a chargeback, it's like this annoying thing where you have $3,000 negative with, whatever carrier. Let's say it's Foresters, and you don't write a lot of Foresters. So every call, every house you go in, you're like, I got to have Foresters. I got to have Foresters. I got to have Foresters, versus just being with the client. Right. And then you get one over here, and then you get a chargeback over here, and they're like, it's not stuff that you do all the time. Right. So having, a core of carriers, maybe 3 to 5 carriers that you write all the time, is going to help you mitigate when you do have a chargeback. It's like, oh, I always write that anyway, so I'm back out of the hole and I'm back on top. That's the first way. And then the second way is, well, now you have the chargebacks, right? You have some debt with, one of the carriers, and you go, well, instead, that's just with that carrier, but that's not with these 3 other carriers. So let me go write them so I can get paid today, because instant gratification, right? I got to go pay my bills. And then now you're negative with that carrier. And then you keep doing that until next thing you know, you're negative with 5, 6, 7 carriers. Now you have 7 problems instead of just 1. So that is what carrier roulette is. It's not a fun game to play.
No, it is not. You lose every time, guys. So write the carriers you're supposed to write. Stick with a couple of core ones. Don't go trying to get fancy just because you're trying to get paid. That's selfish. Put the client where they're supposed to be, and it's all going to work out. You have something else to add to that, Josh?
Well, I was just going to ask you and see if yours are different than mine. I mean, everybody maybe has their certain couple carriers to a degree, but just to give people some framework, I mean, what's your, workflow on carriers, first, second, third, fourth, as a general rule? There's going to be niche situations, of course.
So I like to write a lot of Americo, obviously, for many reasons. And some people that go, well, Jamie, Americo is not the cheapest. Am I really doing the client the best service because this carrier over here is $20 cheaper? Am I doing the best for the client? You know what's best for the client is you staying in business. You're their agent for life. So at the end of the day, I sell on value. I don't sell on price. Americo has extra benefits that other carriers don't have. Therefore, it's a little bit more expensive. They also pay the best. I need to be in business so I can be your agent for life. And guess what? Most of the time when I get done with my appointments, most people go, oh, what was the company's name again? Because all they care about is Jamie's my insurance agent. That's all they care about. So Americo, obviously number one for many, many reasons. And we're not going to do an Americo call today. Maybe one day I'll have Bobby on to tell you why you should write Americo. But Americo, I write a lot of American Amicable. That's for reasons just because I deal with a lot of people with heart disease. They're really lenient on heart disease. I write AIG, Mutual of Omaha, Prosperity. I don't write a lot of Prosperity. I know it's a great carrier, great bonuses. It's bonusable. I should be writing a lot more Prosperity. I just have gotten really comfortable with AMAM. I don't write a lot of Aetna at the moment, but also a good carrier. But I try to stick within 4 or 5 different carriers, Mutual of Omaha, and I try not to step outside of it. And obviously, I'm probably going to remove this from the call because I don't want to talk down on carriers here at the end of the day. But we love all of our insurance carriers. But as a general practice, no matter what your personal preference is, stick to it like 3 or 4 or 5 and try not to go outside of it unless you get in super niche situation where it's like, I'm not getting the sale unless I write Ethos or something, that's outside of the box. Yep. So let's see here. Last couple things and we'll get off of here. Josh, what has been, so staff. So you can have virtual assistant staff, somebody that can help you keep business on the books. I was afraid to invest into somebody to help me keep business on the books because I thought it was an expense. The way that Grady broke it down to me was, dude, if they save 2 policies a month, 3 policies a month, 4 policies a month, they pay for themselves. So for you, like, what do you guys do from like a staff perspective, virtual assistant, just to make sure that you can keep more business on the books? Because the more business you keep on the books, the less chargebacks you have, the more you get to keep.
Yeah, I remember, I can't remember if it was month 1, month 2, somewhere, it was pretty quickly when we were helping around 20 families a month. I was beginning to pull my hair out because there was, you have to call the carriers and you have to, I remember that LA conference that we were at when I first started. I remember standing in line for lunch, and then I got an email from one of the carriers that someone's payment didn't go through. And I literally stepped out of line to get them on a 3-way call with the carrier to update their payment so it didn't charge back. Right. So it's just like super aggravating and stressful to like try to keep the train moving forward and then deal with all this stuff. So pretty quickly, we hired a virtual assistant to do a few things for us. Number one, when those emails come in saying, Sally Johnson, her payment didn't go through, they're hitting those, right? They're calling them up. And I get messages from my VA all the time. Oh, hey, yeah, we rescheduled her premium to draft on Friday, or her payment method was wrong, and we did that. And from 2 perspectives. One, I'm so happy to have that, but I'm happy I don't have to be the one that's like always just focused on it. Because when you're focused on that, which is again just plugging holes in the boat, you're not focused on growth, right? And I want to be focused on growth as much as possible. So that's one thing. Us personally, we also do we have them send out cards, thank you cards, that kind of thing. And I can't say how many times we've gotten a text or a call, and to be perfectly honest, my wife, Michelle, and the VA setting out cards. I didn't know that we were setting out cards, right? So that's why she's the boss and I just work here. But I got a call from one of my clients and they're like, hey, thanks so much for that birthday card. Like my cousin needs to talk to you about insurance. And I was like, oh, awesome. And I'm like, do we send out cards? Oh, we do. Yeah, that's great, right? And so it's all these little things that are running in the background while you can just focus on doing the main thing. Or it could be, I was just talking, I can't think of who I was talking to. Maybe it was you, Jamie. Maybe it was somebody else that has been going back when somebody drops off the book because the payment doesn't go through. We like to think, oh, well, they called up and they canceled it and they can't afford it. Well, no, maybe they just couldn't afford that premium, but you could come back and rewrite them for a lower premium. And I was talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, I went back and I rewrote a bunch of people and just lowered what they were paying. And they were happy to have it. They just maybe, for whatever reason, when we wrote them up, they got a little too excited and picked the top option when they should have picked the lower option. So yeah, I mean, honestly, that hadn't really something that I had been thinking about, but an agent just told me that. I was like, oh, wow, that's incredible. I should start doing that.
So guys, staff in general, I hired, Samantha. She was from my church group. She started off for me. And then once we got further along, I hired a virtual assistant, and, Sam moved into contracting. Virtual assistant started calling the clients. Guys, I haven't called a carrier in 2 years. Okay. If you're spending time on the phone with carriers on Hold with America, ripping your hair out, then got to get a virtual assistant. InsuranceVA.com. If anybody wants to type that in the chat, InsuranceVA.com. Start Virtual is the company. They have FFL specific virtual assistants. They're fantastic for helping keep clients on the books. Last couple things, and we'll jump off of here. I know this has been a longer call, but hopefully you guys have gotten some value from it. Josh, you mentioned like a practice that a lot of new agents fall into, and they listen to top producers do it, and they try to emulate what they're doing, but they leave out a few little keys, and it ends up being the reason why they have business fall off. And it's this whole, hey, we're just going to submit a request for coverage, and that's it. They don't talk about the process. So expand on that for us, on how that can be detrimental to your business, on what gets submitted versus what falls off, and what issues and what people keep just by not following that word track properly, or, trying to just get paid. So you're lazy with explaining what happens next.
Yeah, and it's for a few reasons. It's, maybe you're just getting started and you were on Live Dials or in a training and you heard somebody say, yeah, we're just going to submit a request today. We got to wait to see if it's approved. And then you get down to the bottom of the call and, maybe the person, they they're giving you some objections, or, they're saying, I want to think about it, or, I don't want to give you my banking. And I've heard crazy stuff. Oh, all we're doing today is putting in a request, right? Like, we're going to get back together and you can let me know then if they're going to accept it or not. When in reality, it's like, no, once it's approved, it's coming out of the bank account, right? And then if you do have that habit, right, all you're going to do is just create a ton of problems for yourself with a ton of people that you have to get back with, and make sure that, for sure, did you want it? And do we have to change your date? And then, you're going to have a ton of chargeback. So that line of, hey, we're just putting in a request today, while that is technically true, right, the way that you wield that sword is going to determine that sale and how sticky it is. And so what people miss is all the value built from the start of the call to the time that the person goes, yeah, I'll take that option. Let's put in the request. And that's usually, taking the time to find out the why, and not just, you have the person, well, I'm getting older, I need to get insurance. Well, no, like, what's it going towards? Who's the beneficiary? And kind of figuring those things out. That's the number one place I really feel like you solidify the sale or miss the sale, right? Not being detailed in the conversation about like what's going to happen. And yes, this is going to come out of your bank account, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. Being too vague, because if you feel like, well, if I tell them exactly what's going to happen and how this is going to go, then they're going to tell me no, and I'm not going to get the sale. So let me just, leave out details so I can get a yes, right? Where, again, you just want to get paid, and I get it, but right, creating that revolving door for yourself is just going to lead to all the other problems that we've talked about. So that, and then the whole 30-day free look, right? That's like the second half of that, where it gets used unappropriately, right? Well, hey, you're going to have 30 days to decide. No, we're deciding today. And then after it's in force, then you have 30 days to, make adjustments. Now that's true and everything. And I believe you should let people know that, like, at least I do, but I don't let them know in the way that, well, hey, yeah, we're just going to put in a request today and you have 30 days to decide. That's not true, right? And that can get you in trouble. So be very, very, very careful on how you use those word tracks.
Sometimes you just have to slow down and explain the process to a client. Hey, we're going to start a 30-day free look period. If it does get approved, they're going to take the first premium. Okay. Hey, why do you need my bank account? So you can pay for it. Hey, we need to make sure that the same person that's applying for the insurance is the same person that's paying for the insurance. So there's no fraud being committed. That's you, right? Yes. Okay. What's the routing and account number? It's like, you have to like be unafraid of the fact that they might say no. And if they say no, guess what has to happen? You have to go dig back into the why and figure out if you built enough value or not. But some people, they don't want to have to fight for their clients. So they say, hey, we're just going to submit a request for coverage. And then that policy ends up falling off anyway. So was it really worth it if you got paid today, but then you ended up having to pay it back tomorrow? Was it really worth it? So how you wield that sword, I like how you said that. So last thing, and we'll get off of here. So we're coming up on Thanksgiving. We're also coming up on the Christmas, New Year's, holiday season. People, they go out of business during this season, or they double, triple their production. They put more Christmas presents under the tree. Turkey tastes better when they just help 10 families. How would you have a conversation with someone around working the holidays, and what would be like a typical schedule? Like you've got family, I've got family. Like, best believe I am not, going to be working during the holiday, but people think that Thanksgiving is a 5-day holiday. It's not. It's a 1-day holiday. Black Friday is not a holiday. Small Business Saturday, not a holiday. And Cyber Monday, not a holiday. But it is a great work day, because guess what? People are home. And Christmas is not a 2-week thing. Just because your kids have 2 weeks off school doesn't mean you got 2 weeks off work. Again, are you paying your bills? You don't deserve to have any fun if you're not paying your bills. I love you, but you don't. So what's your conversation with people around the holidays? What's your schedule looking like moving into it, Josh?
Yeah, well, I would say, first thing I would say is, no matter what, like we talked about, if you're in a hole, if you're financially in a mess and need to get somewhere, people will be buying insurance every single day, right? And if you're like, well, why would they? This is Christmas. Yeah, Thanksgiving, all those holidays, people are out buying stuff, right? So know that, me personally, yeah, I'm going to take the day of Thanksgiving off. I'm going to take the day of Christmas off. but the day before and the day after, I will be working, because I'm self-employed, right? Because I have goals, because, I made promises to my family, and, there's really no excuses to not come, to come short on those, other than I just didn't put in the necessary work. And that's to me is not an excuse, right? So that's my personal, I'm going to be working every day except for those two particular days. But yeah, I mean, if anybody has dialed even one day, and then you've come back, you've taken off even the weekend sometimes, and you come back and the phone is just 10 times heavier than it was the weekend before, right? Your client seemed a little meaner the week when you came back than they did before, right? The objections were more, all that stuff was harder when you came back. Now go eat a bunch of turkey, right? And you're weighted down. You have all that salt flowing through your veins, and you're just like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. Be super, super careful. And I get it. We have all these government holidays, you got to take this day off, that day off. My dad will call me, hey son, what are you doing for this holiday? I'm working. Why? Because that's when everybody else is off. So that's when I'm working. And so, yeah, like we're going to all load up on all this great stuff, but like, just, I caution you to get back to work. Not maybe you don't need the money and that's great for you, but staying sharp, I need to stay sharp. I'm sure you need to stay sharp. So if you go too many days without putting in that effort, right, you get a little slower, you get a little lazier, and again, that's when problems happen, right? When you stay on top, when you stay sharp, you can weather the storm. One of the things that take great salespeople out is overconfidence, right? You've been busting it. The holidays are here. Take some time off. And in the back of your head, you're going, man, I can close anybody anywhere because that's what I've been doing. And then after, right, you have a little time off, a little chargeback, no big deal. And you come back a little slower, right? You got to take a week to ramp up, and then you get another chargeback. And now you can be in one of these problem situations we've been talking to. So be cautious, do what you got to do with your family, but no one said that you have to do any more and live up to the expectations of everybody else, because their goals aren't your goals.
That's powerful. So guys, there's been a little bit of tough love on this call, and I don't apologize. I love you, but I don't apologize, because at the end of the day, if this can help you make it in this business, it's 100% worth it. Now, are Josh and I experts at making it? No, there's more problems coming ahead. And guess what? We're ready to climb the hill, because we're not going anywhere. And it's like, what are you made of? Well, I'm going to take care of my family. That's it, period. No matter what. So you just got to continuously ask yourself the question, like, what are you made of in this business? I refuse to go broke selling insurance. So I hope that's you too. I hope that you don't just refuse to go broke, but you decide that you're going to get ahead. You can get really far ahead, really, really, really far ahead, if you just decide you're going to do what most people won't do. And guess what? What most people won't do is they won't dial on Black Friday, best dial day of the year. They won't dial the day after Christmas, one of the best dial days of the year. They won't skip that one thing because they have fear of missing out on everything. Guys, you could have fear of missing out on one thing right now. Do you know what I have fear of missing out on? I have fear of missing out on my kids' sports games in the future. I have fear of missing out on being available for them when they need me. Right now, they're young. Some of y'all don't have kids. I have fear of missing out in the future. I don't have fear of missing out right now with friends and associates. I have fear of missing out with my family because I wasn't willing to work out. Fear of not being able to make decisions and choices to be able to take care of my family and put them in the position that keeps them safe. Okay. So I keep that in mind when I'm making these decisions. So guys, we want to see you win. This is all coming from a place of we've been there, and we don't want you to end up in a place where, you're out of this business, because this is the best business ever. It is. And we want you to experience it. We want you to thrive in it. And if you just take a couple of steps and you're disciplined and you just are smart and you continue to work, your life can change, guys. It can change dramatically. So we love you. We appreciate you all. We hope you guys got something good out of it. If you need anything, you need to have a conversation, reach out. Happy to always talk through anything. We've been through it and we're happy to help you through it. So everybody have an amazing day. Reach out if you need anything, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace out, guys.